In the early hours of this morning, the IDF commenced a ground operation with special forces based on intelligence against the premises where we understand Hamas senior terrorists and others and operatives have been holding up, taking refuge on the premises, taking advantage of the infrastructure that the hospital has in order to plan, conduct, and instruct operations from that premises. So we have embarked on an operation in the early hours of this morning, and I would say a surprise operation against those that are taking refuge in the hospital premises and conducting the attacks and against our forces. So the reality is one where we are very determined to seek out where Hamas are operating from. And time again throughout this war, we've seen that they have no bars. There is no limits on the cynicism of their operations. They will operate in, around, and beneath hospitals. And this morning, we're proving it once more that they will use the operations of hospital facilities for their terrorist activities. There is nothing shocking about the cynicism of this terrorist organization, and it's definitely not a funny issue or a laughing matter. Hamas have systematically used hospital premises. So when we find weapons, or when we find funds that are stamped with Hamas's insignia, when we find senior leaders like Faik Mavkhouk, who we killed in this morning's raid, it's because we know that they will operate in the urban areas that they've weaponized, and they have weaponized in the most atrocious way, really. The use of hospitals. Hospitals should be used for healing, and they should not be safe havens for terrorists. What they're doing is a crime, and this is why there is nothing about this operation that surprises us anymore, because we know that they just don't care. They don't care for the well-being of the civilians, Israelis or Palestinians. So I think it's a very clear warning to the Hamas Ministry of Health's operatives, their administrators, that we are aware that Hamas is using hospital premises for terrorist activities. And that is why we sent and spoke to them recently in order to warn them that if they don't stop it, then we will have no other choice but to operate against them. I think this is part of the process, of the due process that is required and expected, but also a general understanding of that decency that is required when conducting operations against in areas which are densely populated, where there are civilians being treated or taking refuge. And when we're trying to distinguish between the civilians, the civilian infrastructure, the means and needs of the civilian population. So yes, indeed, we did do a phone call in order to announce that we are aware that terrorists, that Hamas terrorists and other terrorists are taking advantage of the protected authority that hospitals should have. We are also very determined to continue our activities, and that is why, hopefully today, we will continue to facilitate the access and distribute aid to the hospital. And that is precisely one of the messages that we conveyed in that conversation, that we will facilitate, and just let us know what you need so that we can supply it. And we will facilitate the access of humanitarian supplies and medical supplies to the hospital so that they can continue to operate throughout the course of this Special Forces operation. So here's what we know. Faik Mavkhouk was the head of, one of the heads of the internal security. He was responsible for coordination in the Gaza Strip of the terrorist activities, which includes planning and the orders of execution of activities, of terrorist activities. He was basically a target amongst others that we understand were taking refuge. And we've also announced that in the course of the day, over 20 terrorists have been killed in exchanges. They did open fire at our forces as we approached and entered the premises. We found on the road to the hospital that an explosive device also was detonated against our forces. So it just goes to show that they've tried to make this hospital a fortified position to try and protect their activities. that is jeopardizing the hospital, the sanctity of the hospital, and indeed putting the people who are in dire need of the medical services at risk. We are operating with precision. We're operating specifically against the terrorists, and we are determined to make sure that Hamas cannot and will not feel safe anywhere in the Gaza Strip, as long as they are trying and aspiring to lead the Gaza Strip. They need to know that they have no place on this earth, and we will continue to hunt them down. We will continue to pursue them, and we'll continue to arrest them wherever we can. They will be detained. They will be brought to justice. And I would say, David, that every operation that we are conducting, where we are arresting or killing, creates more intelligence that is creating more operations of the likes of this early hours of this morning. We destroyed yesterday a extensive tunnel, over 2.5 kilometers long, a tunnel, an expensive, expansive infrastructure that Hamas used just for one purpose, to commit and conduct terrorist activities, not for the welfare of the people of Gaza, but just for the actions of these terrorists, these ruthless, brutal terrorist organization and its activists. So as we are pursuing them, we are revealing more and more intelligence, more and more of their infrastructure, more and more of their capabilities, and we are degrading and destroying them as we move forward. So a few weeks ago, we released 2 hostages that were being held in Rafah. So we know for one that hostages are most probably there. On the evacuation or in the extraction of the hostages out of the area, we came under heavy fire. So the other issue that we know is that Hamas are still very strong in their force capability in the Rafah area. We know that there are 4 battalions in the Rafah area. We know that they are still operational. We know that they still have the capability to conduct organized assaults against us. And therefore, we know that we have no other choice but to pursue them, seek them out, and destroy those capabilities, as we have throughout most of the Gaza Strip, destroying and dismantling approximately 20 battalions in the course of this war. So as you rightly pointed out, the government, the Prime Minister, has given a green light in accordance, and he made an announcement of such that the government has approved a ground operation in Rafah. We will conduct it in accordance to the laws of armed conflict. We will evacuate the civilians to humanitarian islands outside of those areas so that we can conduct our operations. Like everything in this war, we've been operating precisely, with caution, with no rush, because we understand that a terrorist entity that has been planning for terrorist activities in the last 16 years cannot be defeated overnight. It's a long war, and we will take the time and effort in order to achieve our goals. There are 2 ways to bring hostages home, basically, through special operations like we conducted a few weeks ago against Hamas, as we brought 2 hostages home, or through negotiations. And as the negotiations are developing and as the ground operations are going on, we are conducting inquiries, probes, investigations, field investigations, as we're arresting and detaining terrorists, Hamas terrorists. We're getting more and more information that create the operational opportunity to understand maybe about the well-being of hostages. And in the last few days, we've announced the death of 2 soldiers that were abducted into Gaza on the 7th of October. And so as we move forward, this is the type of intelligence that is constantly coming in, constantly being brought to our attention. And therefore, there are operational plans that can be developed and designed in order to bring them home. I think that there is an important message that when we targeted Marwan Issa, the number 3 of Hamas 10 days ago now, we were very clear in our message that we are, with very high certainty, no hostages were killed in this strike. And I think we've called, and we have in the past called off operations, whether rescue operations or other operations, precisely because we understood that it could put hostages in jeopardy. So we are determined to bring the hostages home, every last one of them, either through negotiations or through operational force on the ground.